All right, let's a good transition to talking about aldermanic races for a second. Pat O'Connor, obviously the mayor's unofficial floor leader in city council, basically a leading apologist for the mayor insofar anyone cares about what he has to say about the mayor. Jenny, what's your sense? You live in the ward, you have people reporting on the ward. Is somebody like Pat O'Connor actually in any kind of trouble, and is it because of Rahm?
No. I mean, basically, I didn't even know anyone was running. I wouldn't, if I just were a citizen living in the ward, I wouldn't know anyone was even running against him. Our reporter Patty Wetley in Lincoln Square has lived in the neighborhood forever. She knows everything about the neighborhood, and she did a interview with Diane. How do I say her last name? Do you know? Delyden. Yes, I was gonna butcher it. And she, we're gonna have that out, I think, this week or next week, an interview with Diane. But just what I said about the mailers, just making making any inroads with that much. There's a giant Pat O'Connor billboard. There are signs everywhere. There are flyers. That
must be hard to look at
everywhere. I mean, it's impossible. Like, if there was a sign, it would be buried in 9,000 Pat O'Connor signs. The one thing that I thought was really interesting that she said in one of her questionnaires, I think it was for the Tribune, was that she was interested in kind of bringing the north end of Lincoln Avenue back to life, which is, I live Foster in California. So I live at the strip of Lincoln Avenue that has Boomers, which has been vacant for 30 years, and basically medical offices, and there's just not much over there. There's a Shelley's Freeze, which is on point hot dogs and ice cream, but there's not much else over there. And Patty is looking into that and what she has planned for that strip of Lincoln. And there's a lot of people over there who own homes who I'm sure are not thrilled that that strip of Lincoln has not changed in so long. And when you have Lincoln Square, which is booming, and
don't forget about the Hidden Cove for a
and the Hidden Cove,
No,
karaoke.
I actually, at the risk of sounding really naive, take it as a great sign of rebirth of democracy in Chicago. That Pat O'Connor has an opponent, and this is a guy who was the floor leader of Mayor Daley before he was Mayor Rahm's floor leader. So he's probably as responsible as anybody else in the city council for the passage of the parking meter deal,
and every other budget that now he and his colleagues are decrying for bankrupting.
Exactly. So all the policies that supposedly implemented by the mayor that we're not allowed to name because everybody who's criticizing them supported the mayor that we're not allowed to name, come at the urging of Pat O'Connor. I believe he was unopposed in the previous 2 elections. So the fact that the guy who was the architect of some of the most unpopular and bad policy that the city has faced would go running unopposed would be a horrendous statement about the lack of democracy in the city of Chicago. So the fact that someone's running against him, a school teacher, is a great thing. The fact that she's has no chance of winning, or the conventional wisdom is she has no chance of winning, is sort of a bad statement about Chicago. I mean, why would you reelect the person who is responsible for the most wretched legislation of the last 4 years that our current mayor says he's trying to undo?
Well, I wish I could. I agree with the reason for your asking the question, but I think the answer to it is because people generally vote for their alderman or against their alderman based on things that are going on in their ward. People don't hold their aldermen accountable for the mayor. And why? That's a whole nother issue. They are supposed to be legislators as well. But, if people are outraged about the state of Lincoln Avenue, there could be some resistance against Pat O'Connor, but they're not going to blame him for Daley or Rahm, even though you and I, maybe everyone in here, I don't know, agrees they should.
Well, that's funny you should mention that because one of the flyers that Mayor Rahm, this goes to show you how inconsistent we are as a people here in Chicago. One of the flyers that Mayor Rahm sent out lambasted Bob Fioretti, who's running against Mayor Rahm, for his vote on the parking meter deal.
That's right.
So we have Mayor Rahm spending money, sending out flyers, lambasting Bob Fioretti for his vote yes on a parking meter deal that was orchestrated through the city council by Pat O'Connor, who is the mayor's floor leader and is getting literature sent out by Mayor Rahm as we speak, telling voters to re-elect him. So why would we re-elect the man who's responsible for the legislation that you call so onerous that we shouldn't vote for Bob Fioretti in the first place?
Ben, I'm really confused.
I know. See, this is the issue. This is totally the issue. I mean, on Pat O'Connor's billboard, it's like, this is the safest ward in the city. I think it says, if this is the safest ward in the city, how are you going to vote against the safest ward in the city? You reading about, shootings in this neighborhood and this neighborhood, and you live in the safest ward. How are you going to... And I think it's a messaging problem. And like Diane, I was reading about her, and I, as a resident of the ward, like I was like, oh my God, yes, do something with Lincoln Avenue, please. But like I hadn't heard that, like I hadn't heard, or no, the revitalizing Lincoln Avenue, and like I think it's just. I'm a Parks and Rec fan, and when they were talking about putting fluoride in the water, and they had to call it something else because people were like, fluoride, that's science, that's boring. So they were calling it, I don't even remember what it was, but they had like sex up the water.
Yeah.
And they basically like got bikini models, and like people, really hot people, to be like, you're gonna look like this if you drink the water. Like it's sad, and I'm not saying like all Chicagoans are that way, but I do think that you need a little like, these races need a little bit of finessing. Like there needs to be a little bit of, you need to just talk in a normal, like talk about things that people...
Well, I think the notion of an alderman putting up that it's the safest ward in the city is so absurd because Pat O'Connor has absolutely nothing to do one way or the other with the policing in the 40th ward.
Right.
And furthermore, God, now we're on a real obsession of mine. Like for all summer I was ranting and railing about how horrible the state of the streets were throughout the city of Chicago, particularly the 40th Ward, because I was always riding my bike through the 40th Ward. And so
I mean literally the streets, not safety on the streets, but the actual
the safety of the right. So
condition of riding your bicycle or driving down the streets. All right, let's there's a lot of other races besides the one in the 40th Ward. What other aldermanic races are you and your team following closely?